So the Ekurhuleni Municipality is taking stock of the damage caused by the protest in Tembisa this week. At least 30 municipal vehicles were torched, 3 ATMs bombed, and a hall burnt in those disturbances. Residents accuse the local government of turning a deaf ear to their concerns. Let's make sense of this for you now. Bringing the Deputy Co-operative Governance Minister, that's Thembi Nkadimeng, who joins us via our video link this morning. Deputy Minister, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much indeed for speaking to Newzroom Afrika. Let's begin here. I mean, you've served, for instance, as the president of the South African Local Government Association before. Several people watching what's taking place, not only this week, but also today in places like accuse, say, there's a growing disconnect between municipal officials and the people they serve. And that's why we're seeing what we see play out in the streets. To what extent do you agree with that?
Well, thank you and good morning to your viewers as well. Look, local government was designed not to have communities only as stakeholders, but as direct participants of areas where they live. That is why, for example, there are IDP consultations, which are mandatory by law for municipalities to do. But the number of protests we are seeing countrywide does indicate that there is some form of disjoint and disconnect with the people believing whether municipalities serve them the way they want, meet their expectation, but ultimately what should they do or how could they best express if they feel that their expectations are not met. I mean, for example, in 2018 when we closed the financial year just prior COVID, SASRI, our special risk insurance, had closed the year at local government with no less than 400 million in damages coming from community protests alone, either burning a house of a councillor or a municipal property or a government infrastructure like burning a library when you're looking for a hospital. It calls for more connection and discussion between municipalities to be able to express and meet their communities promptly, even when the service will not be available.
Absolutely. And the operative word there being what you were emphasizing, promptly, because often there's criticism around when officials finally, let's say, descend on the ground, so to speak, to actually engage with residents. The real concern is that often that happens too late. By then the damage is done and it leaves the community itself worse off than it was entering the protest.
Well, it's very true. And let's look at the personnel that we have as local government. You have got a ward councillor who is assisted by law by 10 ward committee members. Then you have got community development workers still under the department. You have got a social worker from another institution. You have got quite a number of citizens which are employed by government, all of them to be able to assist communities. But on another hand, our communities as well carry a responsibility of securing what they already have while they rightfully demand what they don't have. So in the Ekurhuleni instance, I know our communities are grieved. Their reasoning could be fair, the disconnection of services in the light of unemployment, a sluggish economy or whatever. But for them to ban an infrastructure, it will then take the municipality again to take the funds to repair that infrastructure. We could have done it differently, and we can learn from other countries on how do they protest as well in order to make sure that we don't move 2 steps backward and move 3 back, which means we have lost everything that we had. But we also have to remember that municipalities are not in a strong financial position. The indicators of the economy outside municipalities are weak. Inside the municipalities are weak themselves. If they can't be able to pay, it means the municipality can't generate funds. And the municipality, on another hand, needs to find a way through our free basic system to accommodate as many people when the economic situation is low and is weak, it's poor, to ensure that we provide services. I mean, water is life. What are you supposed to do without water? You can't even go out to look for a job if you can't take a bath ordinarily. But we have got to try and balance these issues to make sure that all is well.
Speaking about balance, I hear you about how municipalities are in a difficult financial situation because of the economy. But surely it shouldn't be lost to us that a lot of those municipalities are also struggling because of the kind of corruption and skullduggery that takes place within those local governments. That arguably is part of the reason why we're here. And on the face of it, people might say that there's little, if any, accountability for that.
Well, granted, but it's not a blanket. You take Ekurhuleni, they come from a clean audit. The AG said whatever you were given to you, you were able to account for. But you go to another municipality, yes, the example that you are giving is true. It's disclaimers the AG has pronounced, but it's not one brush. If we're talking about Tembisa, accountability measures have been put in place. Even the AG has confirmed them, which means we're not necessarily on an accountability issue then. We probably are on a socio-economic problem, which maybe the municipality is not interpreting it correctly. I suspect so. The first part of poverty is in townships. It's in rural areas, me and you know. So we've got as municipalities to interpret correctly, timeously and promptly the communication to ourselves, our policies. A policy that would have been logical maybe in 2 years ago may not be logical today because you lost your job. So a municipality may have to rehash that and look into it. And our background information suggests that this was a policy which was adopted some other years when situations were relatively better, and the council is implementing it now. But our take is that we need, as council, all the time to put the conditions of our people forward, negotiate and use the legal resources that we have better, because you have a point there. I can never deny it. Even the AG confirms the state of our financial accountability in municipalities leaves much to be desired. And by the way, that is it stays strongly in the minds of our people that every time they've got to pay us, they firstly have to think, do they deserve this money that I'm giving them? I better utilize it to pay for school fees or something else, because I do believe that it could be better utilized somewhere. And then it creates a ring and a cycle of poverty at the local government sphere. But in this instance, accountability is not necessarily the issue on the table.
It's interesting you say that because, of course, plenty has been said about the situation in Tembisa, but on the whole, the ANC has blamed these protests on what they're calling anti-poor policies from the DA. The DA is pointing at the ANC in turn, saying the governing party was in control previously and they failed to implement directives from National Treasury, and that's why there are difficulties in that particular community. Does that sound like accountability being taken there?
Well, look, 7-8 months ago I was a mayor myself. A policy I took at the beginning of March 2019, halfway down the line in 2019, I had to review it. Precisely because we were heavy on disconnections. And when people lost their job in June, July of 2019, we had to go back to council. How do we give them rebates? Even if you don't write off the debt, give a rebate, make people to acknowledge the debt, and make an arrangement on how and when can they pay the debt. Cutting cutting off an 80-year-old woman should be a last resort, rather. Because you could even be able to calculate how much does she get from the state and whether that could be able to sustain her and what can the city do. You could also match the rent. If the bill is 20 rand, you take off the 10 rand, she or he pays a 10 rand. There are measures in which a policy review could be made. I don't like the fact that in Ekurhuleni, in this example we are making, that turning this problem political.
Yes.
The other one says you did this, and the other one said you did that. That does not help a resident of Tembisa.
Yeah.
My expectation as a deputy minister is for council to sit immediately and say, we had this policy. Is it relevant today? Is it easy to? Is it applicable? Does it take all the measures of the circumstance now? And what are we going to? I'm expecting the entire council of Ekurhuleni to be walking in the streets of Tembisa with the people, explaining their solution to the problem, not pointing fingers, because that does not help a granny who does not have electricity. But we must not forget, particularly for the city, if you're a resident of Ekurhuleni and you get sick, or your mom gets sick, or your mom is on oxygen, maybe she's asthmatic, and there is disruption, ambulance can't move in and everything, you lose lives even beyond the barrel of the gun. You lose innocent lives, they get inconvenience. They can't live their lives because of a service delivery disruption. So it goes a long way. What if you have a funeral?
Yeah.
You can't even drive to the graveyard. So there are so many social inconveniences that we cause to residents. And as councils, that should be our first thought. That in a community, everything happens. People die. People get sick. People want to move from one point to the other. Children want to go to school. So we should be the last one to be pointing fingers, but rather getting into the ground, resolve the problem. Then yes, debate at the council chamber.
Yeah, you're saying all the right things. I think that will resonate with many people, Deputy Minister. But what's really concerning, as you've mentioned, is seeing this being turned in some kind of tool to come after political opponents. Thanks for your time. Hopefully, your words resonate and land up in the right places. The Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance there, Thembi Nkadimeng, speaking to us via video link. Once again, thanks very much indeed.